I'm really, really proud of the massive volume of work we got done, and just really look forward to seeing the impact of that over the next several years.
Well, those are the words of former Seattle City Council member Andrew J. Lewis, talking about the work he did on council representing District 7 downtown, leading the council's Committee on Public Assets and Homelessness. What impact did that work have? And is the current council trying to undo that impact? We're also in high gear when it comes to the council's budget process, and there's a new power structure for the King County Regional Homelessness Authority that is raising some questions too. We are discussing these questions and these topics and so much more on Seattle News, Views, and Brews, your coffee break political podcast. I'm Brian Callanan. I am a host on the Seattle channel. The views expressed here are mine. My co-host David Croman is on leave, and I thought I'd invite former Seattle City Council member Andrew Lewis to the program. Andrew, how are you? Good to see you.
I am doing great. Good to see you.
I'm really glad we're able to do this. Thank you very much for making this happen. Thanks also to City Grind Espresso, the background noise sponsor for the audio podcast on the first floor of City Hall. A continued thanks to my show patrons, everybody who's written to the City Council about my job, which was cut in the mayor's proposal for the budget, along with many other parts of the Seattle channel. I really appreciate it. The council is talking a lot now about restoring that funding. I owe all of my patrons a big round of thanks. We'll see how it goes, folks. If you're listening and you want to be a patron, please do it. We answer patron questions on the show. There are other perks too, so support the show on Patreon, Seattle News, Views, and Brews. I'm also grateful for Converge Media. The video version of the podcast is on Converge Wednesday nights at 7. All right, let's get the party started. Time for Right Here, Right Now. Well, Andrew, I couldn't let former Council President Deborah Juarez have all the fun. She was on last week, so I'm glad we were able to make this work. What have you been up to? What's been going on?
Yeah, well, first, Brian, it's really great to be on this show as a longtime listener for the first time as a co-host. Do I have to see Kevin Schofield about the member jackets or the gift basket?
Absolutely.
Or is David in charge of that?
Yeah.
I just want to make
sure
sure
management in touch with you. You bet.
Stuff is out of the way before we get going, but it is good to be here. All joking aside, yeah. I mean, I am practicing law again. Throughout my time on the city council, I maintained my law license active, so I jumped right back into it. And while I loved being in public service, I also love the law, love being an officer of the court, and love working with clients to get them through the matters where they need legal assistance. So it's good to be back in that line of work, and it's good to be still working in that area of land use and housing and those kinds of issues that were so interesting to me when I was on the city council. So really appreciative, really grateful to my colleagues who I'm working with over at Van Ness Feldman. And, if anyone out there has any land use or housing needs, give me a call. We're allowed to self-promote here, I assume.
Absolutely. Wouldn't have it any other way. No, it's good. When I talked with former Council President Juarez last week, she said, well, I'm taking a gap year, and then I'm going to think about jumping back into to public office and public life. Are you on a gap year right now? Do you have any plans to be back in office in the future? What do you got?
No, look, I really like what I do, and I really like practicing law. I mean, of course, there's all sorts of ways that you can practice law and be in public service at the same time. But right now, I really like what I'm doing. I like my law practice, and I like my colleagues. And I think it's a good opportunity to get back into that kind of work after a brief hiatus serving in a legislative capacity.
Got it. Well, I know you're tracking what's happening in the city and what's happening with the council. And I just wanted to get an insider's view from you, if I could, because here we go. Council's knee-deep into the budget here. We've got the first of 3 public hearings happening this week. It's Wednesday at 5 in City Council chambers, if you're interested, folks. Starting October 16th, there's this full round of budget presentations from the different departments, a revenue forecast due. Then the budget chair's balancing package. This is from Councilmember Dan Strauss. That's due out by October 30th, so less than 2 weeks from now. And I know we're going to see some amendments after that into November, but won't we have a relatively fully baked budget by the end of this month? What's your thought on that?
I mean, it's hard to say. It certainly looks like Councilmember Strauss, who I served with as a colleague, and Mayor Harrell have put together a very intentional and focused budget process for this cycle with timelines and deadlines that they really intend to meet. A lot of the budgets that I served on, especially early in the tenure in 2020 and 2021, ended up going over a little bit due to the need to react to some very unique circumstances. But everything that I have seen watching and reading the news, like any other Seattleite, has indicated to me that a process has been laid out, and I imagine Chair Strauss is going to want to diligently stick to it.
Yep.
It'll be interesting to see what the community identifies as their concerns and their needs in this first public hearing this week, and how maybe that shapes consideration. Typically those first moments of public outreach indicated whether there'd be some amendments to the timeline or not. It does look like there's some slack and flexibility where the current target, as I understand it, is to end the week before Thanksgiving week, which is slightly earlier than historic, what's been the historic standard. Typically it's, the Tuesday before Thanksgiving is when everything was wrapped up.
Right.
So they built in a little bit of flexibility if the need arises and they need to continue the timeline. But it looks like everything could align for them, and they could wrap up their budget obligations a little bit earlier and move on to other matters.
Well, let's take a look at this in terms of what the mayor is talking about. He's decided to fill this $250 million some odd budget gap for the city using money from the payroll expense tax, otherwise known as Jumpstart, which has outperformed all of its projections over the past 4 years it's been in place here. I haven't heard of any other magical well of money out there to compete with that. So I think it's fair to say that this basic money move using Jumpstart to plug the budget deficit is going to be basically what the council goes with. And I just wanted your take on this idea of using Jumpstart in this way. I know the prior council you served on used some of this money for general fund spending too. What's your take on what the council's looking at here?
Well, first of all, I think we should just take a moment to acknowledge how critical Jumpstart was as a policy being put forward.
Coming out of the pandemic, I think about, yeah.
Oh, sure. I mean, I think that it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that Jumpstart is the most impactful city policy of the last 30 years. Definitely the most impactful city policy in recent memory in terms of the overall impact that it's had and the flexibility that it has provided. I think it's notable that there's not really any credible calls to repeal the Jumpstart tax, despite it being initially controversial when it started. So
I remember the chamber pushing back on it. Sure, yeah. Yeah,
it's sort of on that Affordable Care Act, Obamacare path of validation, right? It's like there's some initial controversy at the beginning, and now it's being relied on to get the city through tough times.
Yeah.
To segue back to your question, though, right, this isn't the first time that Jumpstart has been used to get the city through tough times.
Yeah.
Obviously, a lot of borrowing from the Jumpstart Fund to take some of the excess receipts from Jumpstart to backfill city commitments during really, really tough budget times during and just after the pandemic, when there was a lot of flux in the city's budget situation due to an unprecedented collapse in city receipts due to the economy essentially shutting down due to COVID, and then just sort of the fits, the starts, the dynamic of how the economy and revenue trends restructured themselves as the economy built back following the shock of COVID. So during that time, as we all know, the stock market was doing particularly well. It's been shown by our revenue forecasters that Jumpstart tends to correlate pretty closely to how robust the stock market is, since it's such a big determinant of very high level executive compensation, which is what Jumpstart essentially taxes.
Right.
So, as we look forward at the budget challenges the city is facing, there definitely is a precedent for using Jumpstart to help square the circle in times where it's hard to meet the city's obligations with existing revenue. But I don't think we can take the eye off the ball that the impetus for putting together Jumpstart really was shaped by the COVID concerns of the city, which remain very acute. The crisis around affordability, the crisis around homelessness, the ambitions that we have to reach our climate goals that we have set for ourselves as a city. These are the things that guided us when we enacted Jumpstart and then codified the spending plan into the city and assigned very specifically percentages instead of exact dollar amounts. understanding that we didn't really know exactly how much this new tax would raise, that this is sort of an uncharted waters. And we knew generally the estimate of what it would raise. It's obviously dramatically exceeded those expectations.
Right.
So I do think it's critical that we keep the eye on the ball of decarbonizing the city, reaching our climate goals, funding affordable housing. I mean, I think it's really notable to take stock of the role that Jumpstart has played, particularly in the housing goals.
Sure.
In anticipation of the podcast, I went back to look because I was curious on the total number of units. In 2023 alone, the Office of Housing completed 1,750 new housing units that they supported through their financing, 1,888 additional housing units in the pipeline. And the single biggest source Office of Housing relied on was Jumpstart.
Right.
For 2023, it was about $23 million of Jumpstart money. Taking stock of scaling and building on that commitment to focus on one of the biggest crises facing the city, which is affordability, is something we need to stay focused on. In looking at how Jumpstart has been parsed in the initial proposal here on the budget, the lion's share of Jumpstart projections are going towards backfilling the deficit. 287 million towards that versus 233 million for the original codified purposes of Jumpstart. I think some level, as has historically been done by the council, of using Jumpstart to support the general budget is something that's important and is something the city should do. Whether it should be the majority of Jumpstart, I think, is a question that we might hear a lot at public comment about whether that is the best application of it. The city's facing a lot of really tough decisions, and in terms of weighing those decisions, the current council and the current leadership decided that shifting the focus of Jumpstart was the one they wanted to pursue.
Yeah.
And the folks who are more Jumpstart purists, elections have consequences. The people, the people, like myself or some of my colleagues that were the authors of Jumpstart. I mean, we're not on the council, and the people that are, in fairness to them, they're not bound by those prior commitments. They didn't campaign necessarily on maintaining those prior commitments.
Right.
And it's fully within their power and purview and arguably within their electoral mandate to reshape the priorities of Jumpstart. So, I think that's definitely something to recognize, and I guess just looking forward to what the future policy priorities of the electorate are. It's something they'll get a chance to assess in future elections, but obviously as it stands here, this is what the initial proposal is, and it'll be interesting to see how that is impacted potentially by the public comment on this.
Going to be a lot of that, and I guess you could look at it as well. There's an election for the citywide position coming up this November as well, so how will voters respond to that? I'm interested to see that too. I do want to cover some more ground with you here, Andrew, and we're going to take a closer look at a major decision from the city and county to restructure the King County Regional Homelessness Authority. Who is in power? Who gets left out here? We're talking about a lot here, and we're going to break it down coming up on Now Hear This. Well, in case you missed it, a couple of weeks ago, the Seattle City Council passed a measure to restructure the interlocal agreement between the city and King County with regard to the King County Regional Homelessness Authority. There were many years' worth of complaints about the KCRHA's two-board governance structure. And as Council Member Kathy Moore explained it, the new agreement with only one board will establish a better foundation to work from.
This is a sorely needed opportunity for a reset of KCRHA to create accountability and achieve measurable results for our unsheltered neighbors. I look forward to working with the regional partners to lay a more effective framework for KCRHA to succeed.
So, Andrew, you were head of the City Council's committee that dealt with homelessness up through last year with the challenges of this two-board system. You had homelessness experts, you had people with lived experience. That former system was in place to hopefully ensure the authority's decisions were based on best practices, not necessarily political considerations. Now it's very clear elected officials are wresting back more control by streamlining this into one board. How do you look at this move?
I'm personally supportive of these reforms, and a lot of them were partially shaped from discussions that we had intergovernmentally following Mark Doan's, the first CEO, following their departure from the authority in the summer of 2023, in the summer of last year, to talk about, do we want to revisit some of those core structural decisions that were previously made to shape the King County Regional Homelessness Authority. There's a myriad of different challenges that the authority faces. I think that these initial reforms are a step in the right direction, but I don't think that they're in and of themselves sufficient to solve all of the challenges that the authorities face.
Can I jump in real quick? I just wanted to make sure I pinpointed that idea that people with lived experience of homelessness might be taking more of a backseat in this agreement. What's your response to that?
So I'm going to say this. From my experience of serving on the governing board with people with lived experience of homelessness, the contributions of my colleagues, the most recent interaction that I can remember is as part of the 2023 reform effort over the summer. My colleague, Roosevelt McCorder, who served, I'm trying to remember if it was on the implementation board or the governing board, one of the boards, was a lived experience representative on the subgroup to talk about the governing challenges, was an excellent colleague. And that's uniformly true of all of the people with lived experience that I personally worked with. I don't think that there was an issue having people with lived experience engaged in the governing structure. There were some issues with the external partnerships that were covered in the news that I can't speak to necessarily with more detail than what's been covered in the public discourse around the Lived Experience Coalition itself as an organization. But the folks themselves who are serving in leadership positions with lived experience on the governing board and on the implementation board, who I work directly with, added immense value to the deliberations and the conduct of the agency. In terms of the reconfiguration of the Lived Experience Coalition itself being the gatekeeper to who gets appointed, I think that that's a question to look at in terms of practice of what procedures the new appointing authorities, which as I understand it are going to be the governments or the agency.
Right.
The agency itself. I mean, looking to what criteria they put forth to make sure that's an accessible process, that they're appointing folks with lived experience who are considered legitimate representatives of lived experience voice. I'm open to giving that a chance, right? But those are the criteria that I think that should be assessed by.
Can I jump in again? I just wanted to go back to a point you made earlier that there are other issues with the KCRHA in terms of it moving forward. I wondered if you might be able to expand on that. What are your concerns about this agency moving forward? Where does it need to go? What do you got?
Right. I mean, I think one of the issues, just going back to one of the other things that got changed with these recent reforms, before we move on to additional things, right, is the board structure being changed. I think actually is an important reform for the need of focusing accountability. If you're going to have executive leadership and charge them with making progress on a problem as diverse and challenging as homelessness, it needs to be really clear who that executive authority, that executive bureaucracy is accountable to. The old system that we had before these reforms, the accountability was diffused because you had those two boards, arguably three boards, because the Continuum of Care board was a board as well.
Right.
The executive, Mark Doan's, the initial executive, I think had a challenging time, understandably, balancing the needs and sometimes conflicting goals of these various boards. I think there was a challenge where the governing board was composed, and this is related to another issue we can talk about, but the governing board was composed of people like myself who were also budget writers for the authority. So while the implementation board was sort of charged with kind of being the policy driving force, with the governing board there to just kind of check in on things, if you're the executive of the authority, you're going to care an awful lot about the policy preferences of the budget writers.
You got to tie the dollars to it. I get it.
Even if per the charter, you don't necessarily have to. And I think that was a challenge for the authority, and I think it's one that'll get streamlined by combining those board functions in one place. But that does bring up another challenge, which is that the authority is dependent on the city and the county for its funding. It doesn't have independent funding. It doesn't have an independent funding source. And I think that the scope is maybe a little bit limited, right? I mean, like famously, I mean, sometimes it's mistakenly referred to as the King County Housing Authority. That is a separate entity
Yes.
than the King County Homelessness Authority, but not really having as big of a connection to housing, I think is something that hinders our effectiveness of having a truly regional solution on tackling homelessness, which at its root is a housing problem and something that can only really be fixed by having deeply affordable housing more readily available.
Wow.
And that's not something that's currently within its purview. I'm really excited to see how Kelly Kinnison, who's the new executive director,
Yes.
does, or the new CEO, does in this position working within this new system. I haven't had the pleasure of meeting her yet, but she has an extremely impressive resume. You know, I think that inspires confidence as well, having strong executive leadership. So I think it'll continue to be a process of working through these different wrinkles. I think that these reforms, for the most part, are good initial steps in restoring that confidence and focusing accountability. And I think it's a matter of now moving on to some of the other challenges that the authority will face.
I wanted to talk about another issue with you, if I could, Andrew, and that's the expansion of the CARE department. Community Assisted Response and Engagement oversees the 911 alternative program that gets the social workers out on the street to deal with person down calls, etc. The city's planning to spend about $2 million, add 23 new positions to this department, expanding services citywide 7 days a week. You talked about this plan for years. I remember it on the council there. What does it mean to you to see CARE take shape like this?
I mean, I think it's great. I think that, now official chief Amy Barden,
Yep.
No longer acting officially in the role, is doing a really good job in putting a really critical arm of our first response together. I think that, Mayor Harrell is to be commended for the team that he's brought together and his vision in making this a reality and then putting real resources behind expanding it.
But is it like, darn it, I wish they had done this earlier when I was talking about it? I don't know.
I was there to kick it off the ground last fall, right?
Okay.
And put it together, and I do think it finally came into existence when the administration we were working with was the Harrell administration that had a shared commitment and shared vision for it, and obviously I can't talk about this without also giving credit where credit is due to Lisa Herbold, who was chair of public safety last year, was also very, very instrumental in moving this forward. It's good to see that this is scaling on sort of a similar trajectory and timeline to similar programs in other cities. One of the most famous examples of this kind of response is the STAR program, Support Team Assisted Response in Denver, Colorado, which had sort of a similar trajectory. So if you remember last fall, launched with just a couple of vehicles and a small team, a small enough team where essentially the entire department was able to, show up and appear in press conferences behind us. And that wasn't just a couple of folks, that was the entire department in its early inception. And now we're moving to a phase where that pilot phase has really been able to take care of what it needed to do for the first year in determining the operationability and function of this department. And now they're ready to expand. I mean, even with the expansion, it's not going to be a colossal amount of new people, but the capacity building for how these responses grow, has tracked similarly to this in other cities. So it is sort of a snowball where you start with a small pilot of like half a dozen people, you get up to about 20, and then you get up to you keep building up that capacity in future budget cycles as the bureaucracy is expanding. So I think that this is a good next step. There are going to be central doctrine and policy issues that are going to have to be ironed out. I mean, if you listen to or read kind of local commentary that is more to the political left in Seattle, one of the common criticisms of the CARE department is that it is a dual dispatch system. Typically, it is mistakenly identified. It is mistakenly identified very frequently as a co-response, which is not accurate. Co-response is when you have a mental health worker and a police officer in the same vehicle responding as one integrated unit. Dual dispatch is when you have two separate vehicles, two separate units. but they're both dispatched at the same time. And then there's certain protocols about how they resolve the site when they arrive. Care, just for any listener who's confused, is a dual dispatch system. It is not a co-responder system.
Got it.
Those are very distinct. But the challenge still remains that there are protocols where police need to be situationally aware of the calls that the care team is responding to.
Okay.
How that is implemented in practice could be in a wide range of different interpretations. Like, do they have to both respond? Like if the care team responds first, can they approach a person down or someone experiencing an overdose?
Yes.
Or do they need to wait for the police to first
officer,
get there, and then allow them to approach? Or can they negotiate, over the radio by describing the scene and getting permission from the police to approach and have the police clear the call and move on?
Right.
Both of those interpretations are allowable under the current rules, but it's like, how do you continue to build on giving increasing incremental independence to the care team to fully realize their value as an independent response? That is, I think, what the next stage, in addition to the expansion, needs to really be looking at.
I am very much looking forward to that too, Andrew. Thank you for that. We need to wrap up here in just a little bit. I want to talk about another project Andrew Lewis worked on with the council, and that would be the Seattle waterfront. Some big things happening there. We're going to be right back with that on What's Next. Andrew, I wanted to talk about the Seattle waterfront, the new overlook that just opened up there. I know this was a project you were involved on during your time in council. What does it mean to you to see this out there, this brand new $70 million structure connecting Pike Place to the waterfront?
Yeah, going to the Overlook walk the other day was really an experience that exceeded expectations. To actually be up there, be up there for the first time, like without the reflective vest and the hard hat.
Right.
Be up there when in a space that is fully ready to be used and utilized. It was really great to see that waterfront coming together and go from the design board to reality. When all sorts of things could have come up. Former Councilmember Gene Godden had a good piece on Post Alley today discussing all the things that could have come up and disrupted waterfront space and the plans along the way. And to see that finally realized when so many things don't get off fall on the cutting room floor in Seattle in terms of big projects, to see that one actually get realized is really inspiring. And building on the momentum of the new aquarium expansion opening at the end of August, which similarly provides a portion of that overlook walk up top. The sweeping views and the opportunities for stitching together our downtown and our waterfront into one integrated urban space is something that I don't think we can undercount the significance of in terms of the benefit it's going to have to the city. To tourism, to our urban experience as residents of the city. So, there's still more big developments to happen. We've got another big pier that's coming in down there on the waterfront. So we're not done with big new news on the waterfront. But it was really good to serve as sort of one link in the chain of decades of civic leaders putting that together and building that and really celebrating the culmination of a big centerpiece of that project the other day was a great privilege.
Huge to see. I do need to wrap up with you, Andrew. I did want to ask, just as a parting shot here, what do you miss most about being on city council? 5-hour meetings or 6-hour meetings? I thought I'd parse it out that way.
Yeah, I see now that I'm an attorney again and I get to bill by the hour.
Yes.
My preference now is for 6-hour meetings.
I see.
But yeah, probably 5 hours of the city council because there was no additional the concept of overtime was not extended.
This is a true story.
Bias, unfortunately.
Very true story. Andrew Lewis, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, hey, of course, Brian, anytime.
And that's former Councilmember Andrew J. Lewis talking to us here. And thanks to you, thanks to everybody listening to Seattle News, Views, and Brews, the podcast where you can always find out what's brewing in local politics. Thanks again to patrons who support the show. Really appreciate your help. If you're not a patron, join us. Find the podcast on Patreon, Seattle News, Views, and Brews. You can hear us on Apple, Spotify, wherever you listen. Thanks for watching on Converge Media, too. See you next time. Seattle News, Views, and Brews is an independent production of Callanan Media Services. Copyright 2024.